Hey y'all, thank you for joining me for another video. Y'all, this is, I don't even know how the umpteenth take of this video. Hopefully this will be the last one. I keep trying to make this video and something comes in the way. So Satan must be not wanting this done. But it's been a while since I've done a video. A part of that is because I've been super busy with work. I work 6 days a week right now, which I don't mind. I volunteered for 6 days and I love it. It just doesn't leave much time for much else. And also, quite frankly, I've been I felt like my videos were just about me. And one of my big fears is becoming a narcissist, and because of my ex. So I didn't want to make them about me, but about what I've gone through in order to help others. And, I was dealing with that. But something happened this week that made me realize what I want to talk about today. And first of all, please excuse my voice. Starting Thursday, I started having an asthma flare up. Yesterday, I ended up having to go to urgent care to get it taken care of. So, now I'm on prednisone. Yay. And so my voice is going to be a little gravelly because of it. I'm breathing better than I was yesterday, but it's going to be like this for a couple of days. So try to bear with me. But the other day, I was going through my Instagram. If anybody wants to follow me on Instagram, they're welcome to. Penny Z, as in ZEE, 1021 on Instagram. Up until now, I've been following all things foster care, former foster youth, bio parents in foster care, all within that. I've learned a lot through that, along with trauma. Well, somehow in my algorithm, I got a video suggestion or a site suggestion for Hearts by Jules or Jules by Hearts on Instagram. That evidently she used to be with a narcissist because she's got narcissists pegged to a T. And her reel just got me because it was about what narcissists do. How they do what's called love bombing. And I'll explain that in a minute. And it's like, oh my gosh. So I started following her because she had all kinds of great stuff about narcissism and recovering from a relationship with a narcissist. And because I followed her, all of these accounts that deal with narcissism started popping up on my suggestion stuff. Y'all, oh my gosh. First of all, I didn't realize narcissism was as common or as known as it is, which kind of sort of comforting to know that I wasn't the only one going through this or what I did. I mean, I knew I wasn't, but to see others that have gone through almost carbon copy of what I went through, Evidently, narcissists don't have anything new under the sun. Um, and it was like, oh my gosh. Well, one of the things that she talked about, and a couple of other accounts that I started following, talked about was a thing called love bombing, which that was like a gut punch to me. So, love bombing is where they the narcissist will figure out everything you like, kind of what your love language is, and they'll do all shower you with love. Like for me, what I like is little gifts, special little gifts. I love, um, excuse me, I love to watch the old musicals like Singing in the Rain, Music Man, all of them. And, um, romantic stuff like that. And little gestures like one rose. I love a dozen roses, but just one rose means a lot to me because, it means that you went out of your way to think of me. Well, he knew all of this because we used to talk for hours before we got married. And all I realize now that all of that was just to get me. And then also, this really hurt when I came to this realization just this week. He and I started talking back in March of '87. And then on June 14th of '87, I was raped. I was living with my father at the time, and an individual broke into my home who we figured out that the rapist had been stalking me for at least 2 or 3 weeks. In what I'm figuring out now, he was probably stalking me for several months. Because when I had my first encounter with him 2 weeks before the rape at a local convenience store when I went to go in and get a soda, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, how you doing? You look pretty today," or "You look beautiful today." And I worked at Popeyes at the time in New Orleans. Yeah, I know, stereotype. And so I thought he was one of my regular customers at Popeyes that just I didn't recognize because, at this particular Popeyes, it was on a very busy corner. It was right on the corner of 2 main thoroughfares. So we were always busy. So I figured, okay, it's just a customer I didn't recognize. And he talked very familiarly with me, like he knew me. So because of that, I'm thinking that he actually knew me. Actually started stalking me before that even. Well, anyway, after I was raped, I couldn't live in that home anymore with my father, because I didn't feel safe. So my mom, who lived up here in Nebraska at the time, bought me a plane ticket and I moved up to Nebraska. Well, my ex and I had just started talking and becoming friends, and I didn't know what to tell him because I was starting to get feelings for him, but I also was afraid to tell him that I was leaving because I was raped. Because some guys that they don't know how to deal with that. Especially back then in the 80s. Well, he wasn't buying that it was a family emergency. He somehow knew it was more. From the beginning, he was getting into my head. And so I told him that it was because I was raped. And then he said, so do you know what this guy looks like? I said, oh yeah, right down to the gold on his tooth. And he said, so if you were to see him, you would recognize him. I said, in a heartbeat. He said, how about tonight or tomorrow night I get the guys together, put you in the car with us, you'll be totally safe, and we go hunt this guy down. Well, that got my heart right there. And I told him, no, it's okay. You know, the police are involved. They're actively looking, well, they were at the time. Side note with that, he was never caught for the rape. But I know he's in jail for something else because he was a career criminal. It was very obvious by the way everything was handled with the rape. But anyway, and I said, the police are handling it. It's okay. You don't have to do this. He goes, you sure? Because he's a lowlife. I get the guys together, and all of these guys I knew because I had met my ex through a mutual friend, and we had a lot of mutual friends together. And he said, you sure? Because trust me, they will help me put an end to this. And I knew they would. And I said, no, it's okay. But that's when my heart just went bye-bye. Because it's like he wanted to protect me. And it was something I needed because my father never protected me. Because I had a feeling something like that was going to happen soon. And my father just wouldn't let me do things to protect myself. But that's a whole other video in of itself. And I realize now that in wanting to do away with the guy, he was stroking his own ego. And he was also doing part of what's called love bombing, what I described earlier. You know, getting me to fall for him. Because trust me, I don't know of any woman that wouldn't have fallen for him at that point, or at least started catching feelings. And with me, I don't just catch feelings. I fall hard, face plant. That's how I've always done. And so when I moved up to Nebraska, he and I kept talking. It was weird how he would get these, he said he got the impression to call me when I would wake up in the middle of the night with a horrible dream. You know, a nightmare, flashbacks, dealing with the PTSD. And he would call me and say, I just got the feeling to call you. And I took that to mean that he was bonded with me, even 1,000 miles away. But I wonder if he just said that as an excuse to call me at 3 a.m, to see how I was doing and see if I was doing anything. And just use that as an excuse. Because if there wasn't anything wrong with me, it would have just, quote, shown that he cared for me and was thinking about me. So either way, it would have gotten my attention. And that's, I realize now, in just this week, in fact, with all of these videos, that I've been clicking on. Instagram has gotten way more time of my time this week than it has. And it's hurt because I realize now that none of our relationship or marriage was ever real. That he didn't love me. I've said a few times, and my therapist has even told me, narcissists love themselves. They're not capable of loving others unless it suits them for the moment, which, of course, that's not true love. But watching these all of these reels, it's amazing the power of 20-second to minute and a half video reel the power it can portray. And it just hurts because I loved him with all of my heart. I truly loved him. When I said I do, I meant forever. I told him when he proposed to me, and that's another thing that I came to the realization today, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But when I said I do, I meant it forever. And when I told him, when he proposed to me, I told him right after I said yes, that look, I'm telling you now, divorce is not an option with me. I went through my parents' divorce, and though it was absolutely needed, and I don't fault my mom for it at all, I don't want to put my kids through that. And I don't believe in it. So if you believe divorce as an option and you're not going to work at this, let's call it off now before it even starts, and we'll call it good. And he said no, he doesn't believe in divorce either. That he too witnessed his parents' divorce, and he didn't want to do that either. So, I went on with the engagement. And something that I realized why he proposed to me. So, here's the timeline. I was living in New Orleans with my father, because my father was a narcissistic manipulator as well. I'm realizing that now as well. And I got raped, and then I moved up here to Nebraska to live with my mom and my stepdad. Well, and then my ex and I started talking. Sorry, my brain just kind of went in a fog for a minute. So my ex and I started talking, and I fell in love with him over the phone. I knew him. It's not like I had never met him before. We knew each other through mutual friends for years. So then I fell in love with him. Then my mom got a better job outside of Chicago. So we all moved to Chicago. Well, me, my sister, mom, and dad. My stepdad I called Dad. And the original plan was that my ex and I were going to live together. I was going to save enough money to get back down to New Orleans, stay with a friend a couple of weeks, find an apartment, move in, and we would move in together. Well, the thing that really solidified my heart was we were talking and everything, and I didn't know how to ask how he felt about me, if we were moving in as simple roommates or as a couple. I didn't know how to word it. So I worded it in, I said, so when we move in together, when I come back down to New Orleans, are we going to have 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom? I was trying to be discreet. And he said, well, I know that sex is not something that you might want right now, given the rape. So it would be 2 bedrooms until you're ready to come into mine. I mean, I wasn't saved at the time. And I'm like, okay, that did it. I mean, right there. If I hadn't been falling for him at that point, I would have fallen by that point, because he said all the right things. And I realize now that it was by design. Because he wanted to move. He wanted to move out. But in New Orleans, even back then in the 80s, it was hard to support yourself when you were single. Unless you had a 1-room shack, it was hard to afford a decent apartment. And I was there. He and I were talking. I was a means to the end. He wanted to move out of his apartment with his mom because he didn't want to live with his mom anymore, which is understandable, the fact that he was 23 at the time, but also other issues that he was dealing with. Other issues that I knew he was dealing with, because his sister and I are best friends, and she backed up what he said on that aspect. And so we were going to move in together back down in New Orleans. Well, when I got to Chicago that night, he called me. And I told him, I said, look, I know the plan was that I was going to get a job, hurry up, save money, and immediately go back down to New Orleans so we can get an apartment together. But, I've never been in Chicago. It's a brand new city to me. There's a lot of opportunities. I kind of want to give Chicago a try. And quite frankly, I don't think I was ready to move back down to New Orleans, but at this point I was still healing. And I think that's what it was mostly. Well, as he tells the story, after I said that, he panicked that he would never see me again. And he was up all night thinking about it. And that's when he, quote, realized he loved me so much that he couldn't deal without me. And that's when he proposed to me on September 21st of 87. Well, I realize now, I just came to this realization Thursday. Today's Saturday. That what it was, yeah, he was panicked. Panicked that he didn't have a supply. I could supply him with his own roof over his head, because the intention was that we would move in together, so we would be splitting the bills, splitting rent, utilities, the whole bit. And he'd have benefits in the meantime, and he wouldn't be alone because he didn't like being alone. And it wasn't because of love. It wasn't because he loved me. All the times that he was there for me, listening to me so patiently, when I would be crying because of a flashback, it was just to get what he wanted. And that hurt, to come to that realization. Because, like I've said in this video, and many times before in other videos, I loved him. I truly loved him. I loved what I thought I had. But what I had was a lie. Because he did things like love bombing, where they give you, the narcissist will figure out what you like and what your love language is, and they'll just throw all of this on you. And his big thing is he was always wanting to protect me. And for me, that's a big thing because I never felt protected. The home I grew up in, I never felt safe in from the time I was 9 years old, when somebody tried to break in the house with my mom and my father were still married, and somebody tried to break in that house, and we had a German Shepherd dog at the time that alerted my mom, and long story short, my mom ended up scaring the would-be burglar away. And so I never felt safe in that house. And so being protected was a big thing for me. And because my father never tried to protect me. My father only protected me in the matter of keeping me around because I was his supply too. And that, like I said, that's a whole other video in and of itself. And so in never feeling protected or safe, where my father was concerned, that spilled over to my ex, and my ex was showing all of this attention and wanting to protect me. I called him my knight in shining armor, because that's how I viewed him. Because he was always making sure that I was protected and I was safe, and always calling to make sure I got somewhere, and and I took it as he was protecting me. It wasn't until towards the end of our marriage that I realized it wasn't a form of protection, but a form of control. It's not that he cared that I was okay. It's not that he wanted to make sure that I was safe. He just wanted to make sure that he didn't lose his supply. Because I remember, now these things are coming to mind. After we got married, and it was hard for me at first living in a new apartment, apartment we shared, because it was just something new, and I was still going through healing from the rape. And I couldn't go to sleep at night without the living room light on, because in my mind I was scared that somebody would try to break in and I wouldn't see them in the dark, partially because I'm practically blind without my glasses, and so in the dark I wouldn't see them at all. I wouldn't even see a silhouette. So I had to always have the light on in the living room, and I always had to have music on in the background. We had a little radio, alarm clock radio, that we'd have music on. Because if we didn't have that music on, I'd every little sound that would be made in that apartment would wake me up. And the apartment building wasn't very insulated. We could hear the people above us when they were in their bedroom. So it was hard. And he started getting aggravated because he's like, you need therapy, you need therapy. And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm scared. I don't want to talk about it. And he actually cornered me into getting therapy. Not getting therapy. He talked a couple of times. He called the rape crisis line, the rape hotline, and talked to them on how to help me. And then he told me he talked to them and insisted that I talk to them. And I thought it was because he wanted me healed. It's because going through the PTSD and the healing process, it was aggravating him. It was inconveniencing him because he didn't like sleeping with the lights on in the living room. Our bedroom was off the living room. And he didn't like sleeping with the lights on. He didn't like sleeping with the music in the background, even though the music was low. He couldn't. I looked back and I could see he couldn't stand any of that. And so he was doing it for his own self-preservation. Had nothing to do with me. And it was like a gut punch on Thursday when I came to that realization. Because it was like none of what he did, none of the affection he showed me was real. None of it. It was all self-serving. Even because he knew I was into unicorns. I used to be so into unicorns. And all the statues that I collected had special meaning to them. And he knew it. Each one wasn't just a beautiful statue, unicorn statue. It had a meaning behind it. It was the memory that meant more to me than the statue itself, even though the statue was pretty or striking or whatever. And in watching these videos, I discovered that this is also a common thing with narcissists. Anything that is special to you, they will rip apart. And he would do that to punish me. He'd get mad at me for who knows what and break a unicorn to hurt me because he knew it would. And he, over the years, he ripped up all the pictures of our wedding, which now that doesn't bother me too much. I would have liked some of the pictures saved from me, because there was one particular picture that I took that my brother, who was a photographer, took that was like my favorite all-time picture. And I would love to have still have that picture today. I didn't know. I found out after I had called the cops on my ex back in 2020 that my daughter actually swiped when he started going through his picture rampage, tearing up pictures. My daughter grabbed all the pictures she could secretly and would hide them under her pillow. And she'd sleep on them at night, under her pillow, to hide them in order to try to save some of the pictures. And she actually apologized for stealing. I said, that's not stealing, because you were saving the pictures, and had you even asked me, I would have said yes, absolutely. So, consider this retro permission. But there's all kinds of pictures that he tore up of our wedding, and pictures of my two oldest, and it's just now occurring to me why he tore up those pictures. Because I don't know if I've stated this before, but he picked on the two older children a lot. The oldest one a whole lot, accused the oldest one of wanting a divorce, wanting us to divorce. And it's like, what kid wants their parents to divorce? Generally, I knew my parents needed a divorce. I didn't blame my mom. I thanked her for divorcing my father, but it didn't mean I wanted it. I still would have rathered them being able to stay together. But I realize why now. It was because he came in the way. He took attention away from my ex, because my oldest was going through a lot with school and stuff. It's his story to tell, so I won't go into full explanation. But it was a lot of meetings and, all kinds of stuff dealing with it. And because I was going to all of these school meetings and the like, it took attention away from him, my ex. So that's when he started to say that my oldest son, wanted us to divorce. Excuse me. My throat's getting dry. And then with my daughter in her junior and senior year, she started pushing back with my ex. And so then she was no longer the favorite child either. She no longer had his favor. So pictures of her, he would rip, especially after she moved out. And I'm realizing why. And I found out that with narcissists, this too is also common, where they'll rip up pictures. I would imagine they'll rip up pictures, especially if they know that it's important to you. Like pictures mean something. And I realize now that it was because all of this was coming in the way of him. And the reason why he was, quote, bonded with our youngest child was because, the baby of the family type bond, because the ex was the baby of the family also. And because at first the young child, I think that he was thinking, because he couldn't get the other two on board to do his bidding, so to speak, and want to please him, he lavished all this attention on the youngest, thinking that he could manipulate the youngest. I'm thinking that's what it is now. I don't know. But And so everything he did, kind of a longer video than I thought it would be. Um, so everything he did was out of self-preservation, self-satisfying, everything. Our marriage. Because at first he didn't want any children. And I talked him into having one child. And he said, if we have any children, it'll only be one. And I realize now why he didn't want to have children at all. Because children, you got to spend time with them. You got to take care of them. And children took away the attention from him. And he said something kind of jokingly after he had proposed to me and stuff. And that I realize now was probably the most truthful thing he ever told me. He said that he was shocked that he got to the point that he wanted to propose to me. And that his friends were all shocked that he proposed. Because he always said that he would never get married because on their wedding night, whomever he married, while the bride is in the bathroom getting ready for their wedding night, he's in another room boffing the maid, as he put it. And I kind of laughed at it because I thought it was funny, because I thought it was said kind of in jest. I realize now that that was probably the most truthful thing he ever told me. Because knowing what I know now, I know he cheated on me. I don't have proof. But looking back, I don't need the proof. I know he did. Especially when we lived in New Orleans before we moved back up here to Nebraska. Because after Chicago, we moved back. We were married in December of '87. Then in April of '88, we moved back down to New Orleans, and then we came up here to Nebraska in May of 2000. Just celebrated 22 years here in Nebraska, and so everything he did was self-preservation and self-satisfying, totally selfish reasons. And he only wanted one child just to appease me, because he knew that's something I wanted. I always wanted kids. Quite frankly, I always wanted 5 kids. God gave me 3, and I love them dearly. And I have all kinds of adopted kids, which I wouldn't change for the world. And it just hurts because I loved him. Not that I'm anything special, because I'm not. But I fell for him. I loved him. Everything I did was to please him. Everything he did for me was just to an end, a means to an end. Married me, so he had a way of having a roommate, because he was afraid that I was never going to come back down to New Orleans if I liked Chicago too much, and he wanted to move out of his place and knew he couldn't afford it on his own. Because even back then, unless you made equivalent of $15 or $20 an hour today, you couldn't afford to live on your own, really. And so I was a means to help him live on his own. And then once he got me, I was a means to help with finances and he didn't have to worry about it. He just spent the money. I'm the one who had to pull the belt and manage it and make it last. And um, and I see that now. And so I know that he never loved me. And that hurts because I did love him. And that's what narcissists do. And another thing that confused me, which I'll talk about in a later video, is in the later years, he would do spurts of love bombing where he would randomly get out one of my musical videos, DVDs, like Music Man or something like that, pop it in, make a couple of bags of popcorn, and we'd sit on our couch and watch it together. Just randomly do that, or do that with Beauty and the Beast, or, anything that he knew I liked. And whenever I would consider buying something, because I don't like buying them for myself, at least not back then. Now I've gotten better about that. And he would always encourage me, you never buy anything for yourself. You need to buy this. Go ahead. If you don't, I will. And I always took that. Everybody thought that was so sweet. He would especially do it in front of the salesperson. And everybody thought he was so sweet. And that I had the ultimate husband. No. It was simply so that way, if I bought it, and I tried to, like, for instance, bring up all these things that he bought. Well, you bought this. I used to say it was to ease his own conscience, but he doesn't have a conscience. Not like that, at least. He may have some conscience, but not like that. I don't. And, excuse me. And it wasn't even to ease his conscience. It was simply in case it ever came up that he buys a lot, he could shove it in my face and I just recently paid this, or it was to look good. Because he would always go with me when I'd want to go clothes shopping, which was another thing that always amazed me, because of course men don't like going with women to go shopping. Who can blame him? But he'd always want to go with me. And part of it I realized now was a control thing. Part of it was because he wanted to influence me and buy things he liked me wearing. He always wanted me to buy skinny jeans, long boots, because that was his thing. He liked tight jeans and knee-high boots. And he always wanted me to wear that. And I'm like, I didn't feel comfortable in it because I didn't feel it was appropriate for my size. And it was immodest as far as I was concerned. I just didn't feel comfortable in it. But he kept pushing. And I realized now that it was his fantasy of a woman looking like that, so he was trying to make me into his fantasy. And that's a whole other video in of itself. But ultimately, when you're married to a narcissist or when you're dating a narcissist, they don't love you. They love the idea of you because you're supplying them. You're supplying a need, whether emotional, physical, financially, whatever their need is at the moment, that's what their supply is. And then when they don't need you anymore, when they're done with you, they treat you like trash. And they sprinkle treating you like trash with just enough love, quote love, as in the love bombing, to confuse you and make you think, oh, it mustn't be that bad because look what he's doing. So, well, I've gone over 50 minutes with this video, kind of rambling on. There's going to be subsequent videos on dealing with narcissists. I'm getting a lot of content out of these sites that I'm following now on Instagram. So, you guys have a good day and a blessed week. Stay safe.